tell my friends stand by me only if I'm right. I come out of triple darkness just to see the light. If I say it once, I guarantee I say it twice. If they want me, I ain't going out without a fight. In my dreams, I'm a killer, but for God, man. Try to play it cool, but it's getting hard, man. Rolling with the real and death to all the frauds, man. Not too many of me, yeah, it's kinda hard, man. In my room, sitting in my room. Know they waiting on me and I'm coming soon. Never been a sellout, never been a coon. Y'all be on the camera acting like I'ma show them how true and independent get it. Whole game changed by the time I'm finished with it. We about to get this business handled in a minute.
Welcome to the B2M podcast, where 5 African-American men who have grown from boys into men have established this podcast to talk about life lessons in parenting, culture, all things positive in terms of impact in our community. We're here today at the Code Building in downtown Charlottesville on the mall. Wonderful co-working space for entrepreneurs and other business professionals. Come and check it out. The amenities are awesome. The building is great. The vibe is great. So if you have co-working other office needs, please contact the Code Building. I'm joined here today. I'm the Wavo Black. I'm joined here by John J.G. Yates.
What up, though?
The brothers Tigleek and Joaquin Wynn, and my man Jay Moo over there on the side. You all can contact us at B2M Crew on IG and Twitter. Today we have a very powerful topic to talk about. We've talked about a lot of topics, but we're sitting here in Charlottesville, Virginia, the birthplace of one of America's greatest and most powerful sons, who authored at the 26 years old the Declaration of Independence.
Wow.
And said that, we're supposed to have an equal society and a democracy. Talk about Thomas Jefferson. We're sitting in his backyard, minutes from the university that he created. And also the place several years ago here in Charlottesville, where we had the race riots in terms of white supremacists marching down on the city with their tiki torches from Walmart. Ended up very tragic situation with, I think it's Heather Heyer, was run over by a car, and not much coordination or resistance from law enforcement, to my recollection. Very stunning event for the city. Not that Charlottesville is without its race problems.
Really, for the country.
But for the country, it was sort of a wake-up call about what's going on now in terms of the polarizing issue of race. So what we want to do is hone in on what we taught our children about race and some of our own racial experience, and what's important for us to keep in mind in 2023, where we really since then have even a more polarized country when it comes to racial relations. So what are you all's thoughts, man, about some key things you wanted your children to keep in mind, or that you keep in mind as you navigate racial dynamics in America?
Man, that's a loaded one right there. I think the first thing I like to talk about is making sure that when we had this discussion, for us, whoever talks first, but when we had this discussion, that we be mindful of blending socio-economic dynamics and race. Now, obviously, there are times when they touch each other,
right,
but we want to really try to focus on the racial component for this discussion, and it'll probably spill over into that as well. But let's try to focus in on trying to keep those as separate as we can.
Can you elaborate on that though? Yeah.
Really? I guess really, I want to make sure that we just talking about the racial aspect, because sometimes things can be socioeconomics and not necessarily race, but oftentimes they are. So let's try to,
I said that because I don't know if you remember when we were doing the
thing.
Newspaper. I wrote an article called Socioeconomic Mumbo Jumbo.
I don't remember that.
For the Reflector, for the Reflector, because in reaction to some of the stuff we were putting out and what was going on in the city school system, with the superintendent at the time, there was a scholar at UVA that chimed in and was saying, this isn't about race, it's about socioeconomics. And so my radar went up because he and I had this little
I remember that
exchange and discourse.
Jeffrey.
Yeah. We had this discourse,
I remember that.
and he was saying that when we talk about race and its socioeconomics, that it was a thought experience. And I was like, nah, this is real life
Yeah.
that I'm talking about. So I was just curious about what you meant about it. And it is a difficult thing to navigate because there's a hidden hand when it comes to race that we always don't see sometimes.
And when you think about what's the young lady did the 1619 project, Hannah Jones?
Yeah.
And from that project, thinking about how race is an underlying issue in a lot of
right.
damn near everything, the building of America. So you probably can't really separate it.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying,
but
but we just call some stuff out for what it is. It's like if it's a poverty issue, the question is, when they say what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Mm-hmm.
Did poverty come first and then racism, or did racism inspire poverty?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think the first thing I wanted to teach my kids about the racial aspect of American society without teaching them fear and without teaching them inferiority and without teaching them ways of looking at for excuses. All right. Race can always be a big factor in what we're doing, but we got to make sure, even if it is racial, I don't want you to really focus on that because we don't want that to impede what you're trying to accomplish. Now, it may be a factor, but I really don't want you to focus in on that. I want you to say, I got to achieve in spite of, no matter what's going on. So everything we do, whether it be academics, financially, educational wise, all of these things, healthcare wise, housing, all of these things are impacted by race. But we have to believe, I want to teach my kids that you have to achieve in spite of. You got to overcome in spite of. No matter what the obstacles are in your way, you got to achieve in spite of all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Hey man, we got our cousin in Detroit, right? We had a conversation. His son wants to be a paleontologist, right? And I think he's probably in middle school now, but this was a couple of years ago. He's still in elementary school. And we were talking about his son is brilliant. He's sharp as hell, personality and everything, right? And he was talking to him about history. And he was telling his son knew the history from slavery to Jim Crow to brutalization, hangings, lynchings, and all that stuff, right? And so our conversation was like, when do we have that conversation with our kids? Because I couldn't argue. He told all the truth, right? But I'm like, is that too early? Is it too early for the truth? When do you share that with him? Do you want to put that burden on him? He's going to experience it, right, in life, right? But when do you put it on him? And you don't want him to have that. Damn, I'm damn if I do, damn if I don't. We don't want to put additional obstacles in our kids.
I think life happens. It's going to give you plenty of opportunities to talk about it.
Yeah.
From kindergarten to first grade to middle school, high school, going on to college, work environments. You're going to get plenty of opportunities. And how do you make sure your language is age appropriate, so that you don't start to give those fears or transfer your baggage, whatever baggage we may have.
I try to think back to when back in the 70s for us, it was almost normalized. You know what I mean? Because I remember, I don't know if you guys, and I looked that commercial up, was the United Negro College Fund?
Yeah.
And they showed, and they had the slave and said, oh my gosh, the Bodie plantation, something nigga, and it was a public, with regards to the Negro College Fund. It was like, and so it was normalized. But when I think about what you said, as far as I think you mentioned that with regards to not being fearful of, is because the stories we heard was Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, and being fearful of that, although it wasn't so far removed, I guess, that when they were on in DC, right? And what was that, the 50s, 1950 or something like that?
Yeah. They was marching over in Stanton when we was in high school.
Right.
My wife was in college at JMU. The Klan was marching over in Harrisonburg and Stanton. So that was not we was just like, okay, that's what they doing.
What do you say to people that, like, again, right now you the only one, we all from here. Waki the only one that still live here. And so when I moved out of town and people say, where you from, Charlottesville? They're like, oh, why would you leave that area?
Yeah,
Number one
right.
city in the country.
Right.
I forget which year that was. 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. Number one city.
Small town.
Small town. Yeah. And these incidents happen, right? And obviously we got issues here. We got issues everywhere. But there is a vibrant Black community in Charlottesville, you know, that has a lot of history, put out a lot of intellects, business people, you know. So that is it. So this is not, there's problems for sure, but it's just letting people know that this is not those type of neighborhoods. And these things can happen in any college town, in any city.
It's funny because you felt like defending Charlottesville, but
Right.
at the same time, you be like, man, shoot home some crap, man. No white
Right.
folks been tearing us up for centuries.
Yeah.
And then you went, but they not that bad.
Yeah. But it's so in Northern Virginia, like I was like, yo, what a Black neighborhood up here? They was like, oh, around here. I said, that ain't Black neighborhood. This area was built in the 70s. At least we have Black neighborhoods that have been here years and years and years, and we still trying to hold on to them, right?
Gentrified,
Gentrifying,
raised,
right.
Yeah, they
blighted and all
gentrified,
that,
but we have homes and neighborhoods, but we are losing them.
I'm
Unfortunately.
gonna challenge y'all
okay.
a little bit. Go ahead, bro.
Growing up, I experienced a ton of racism.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I remember, you know, in middle school. I mean, before middle school, but just one of these incidents in middle school. You know, one of the Caucasian kids called me a nigga. I went in school and went in the classroom and we went at it. You know, and then you know when he got in the hallway again, we went at it again. So you know. Just a lot of anger. But I want to back up a little bit because I believe what is it, the second, third grade when they kind of introduced slavery and stuff in schools.
Yeah, that's probably third or fourth grade.
Yeah,
Your first American history,
right.
About fourth grade.
You know
paragraph.
that stuff right there, man. But you know that stuff right there kind of shaped a lot of it, you know, just hearing it and you know, almost like a shock to you. And then, you know, then next thing you know, people experience, you know, as soon as you get out of class, they want to tease you and try to use some of these words that they just heard in class. And, you know, things didn't go well. You know, here you are fighting again, you know. But I wanted, like when my son came along, I didn't want to expose him to, you know, that. But once again, in school, you know, was really his first encounter of racism, you know. I mean, well, you know, when they talk about slavery and all that stuff, and he come home and he just crushed and hurt and broke, you know, and then I gotta have this talk to him and build him up and, you know, stuff like that.
So what'd you tell him?
Well, I told him, I said, well, you know, I don't know exactly what they told you in class, but yes, you know, definitely slavery is real, or was real. And I told him that, you know, I can't really remember word for word what I told him, you know, but just basically, man, you know, it is what it is, but don't let that define who you are. You know, don't walk around with hatred in your heart and mad at the world and stuff like that. And I think that's really one of my messages that I gave him, you know, in a nutshell.
Man, I think when I said I was going to challenge y'all a little bit, because we've been talking a lot about self-love and the importance of knowledge of self. We've talked about that in a couple episodes. And in terms of the timing to teach about race, we got to remember the power of imagery. Before your child can even talk, they're getting exposed to images. Right? That resonate, that travel down. Can you imagine being unable to speak and being like we were and watching Tarzan?
Yeah.
One white dude controlling 7 million Africans, right? In the middle of the jungle. How did that resonate without anybody saying anything to you? That white man must be powerful. Can you imagine the imagery of false depiction of Jesus being the stringy-haired Michelangelo cousin that was painted at the Council of Nice when they decided to color the pictures of the angels and all of that, right?
Right.
And how that stays in our mind till today, even though it's not true. So to me, you forced to deal with race in America from day one.
Right.
And the sooner you get to it with your child, the easier you are to protect them from the impact of imagery, right? Now we're talking about overt incidents when we say we're waiting for something to happen. But the imagery alone is a thing and it's a tool, right?
Absolutely.
The cartoons with Curious George being a little monkey brought over here by a white dude that went to Africa to get him. And, you know, it's a
Subliminal.
metaphor
That's
for a
very
black
subliminal.
person
Yeah.
moving to a city. So to me, if we don't deal with race, and I agree with Joaquin for sure that you're not a victim. But you know what I'm going to teach you? If I'm teaching you knowledge of self, I got to teach you about your surroundings. And we're in a world of iniquity right now.
Right.
And because of your race, because of how God made you, that means something very powerful. That means there's some dangerous things in front of you. That means some things you got to comprehend, because my first experience with race is being called nigger in kindergarten on the playground at Greer Elementary School.
Right.
And then coming home to my mother, who come from a generation where you just suck it up and keep going. But I'm depleted, I'm angry. You gotta, them white folks got what they're, you gotta go get yours. So I don't want to hear nothing about it. Right? And so you lash out.
And we first generation integrated schools, right?
First generation.
Our parents basically integrated.
Right. And then we come in fully integrated, right? And so I can name you hundreds of incidents of race that I dealt with, from being tracked into low reading, which we've talked about, to being unjustifiably mistreated. And so that outlet can really close a child totally down from being who God meant them to be, if we don't deal with that. And so my thing is, it's about the reality. You know, if it ain't just about, I'm gonna teach you about, like even from Santa Claus, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
This
Yeah.
white Santa Claus, even though we say we worship Jesus, Santa Claus knows the same thing Jesus knows. He know when you sleeping. He know when you wake. He know when you've been bad or good. So I'm in church. You got me in church Sunday listening to the white Jesus. And then over here, I'm worshiping Santa Claus. And him and Jesus got the same power. And none of them look like me. Right? So to me, it's absolutely critical to teach them, you're not a victim. You are of the original people of this planet. And that matters. And you're going to have some challenges. But one thing I said was, don't be a victim, but also, and I'm glad it resonated with my oldest son, because I always told them, it's your responsibility to take care of your people. And when he graduated from college and did a speech, he titled it, Take Care of Your People. And still to this day on his Instagram, his tag is, Take Care of Your People. Because those of us that know, we got a responsibility, man, because we don't live on an island. You know what I'm saying? And we got people we love. And so it's not just about surviving race. It's about fighting for justice to me. And that was what I wanted to teach.
Hey, you mentioned imagery, right? We grew up with the Dr. King, right? On the wall. Tell them who's on your wall at the house right now.
Marcus Garvey, the brothers in the Olympic photo. I got
Tommy Smith and John Carlos.
Who was that?
Tommy Smith and John Carlos.
Yeah, that name's right. Got Elijah Muhammad in a picture with Dr. King. And so, yes, that was in a pyramid form, right?
Yeah.
That was intentional about me putting positive images in front of them to feed something different, because from day one, I remember we went to a field trip when Amir was at Peabody to a museum in D.C., right? And I was the group leader for him and his friends, right? And there was a picture of a depiction of Jesus, right? And the docent said, this is Jesus. I mean, he said, that's not Jesus. And listen, as much as revolutionary as I was like, man, yo, like, all right.
Let the lady do her job, man.
Yeah, this is Jesus. That is not Jesus. Dad, is that Jesus? That's not Jesus. Jesus was black. And so, but his comfort level, I had set a new knowledge foundation for him not to be impacted by negative information that was not true. And so it's just interesting, though. Like you said, the imagery is important and powerful, man. But definitely a tough topic. My question to the group is, when your child, even though they're not victims, we talked about that, when they experience incidents of racism, what do you suggest parents do?
Hey, for me personally, you mentioned the Unite the Right rally that happened here where Heather Heyer was murdered. I remember when that during that time, and as we were approaching that moment, and we knew it was going to be a rally, and we knew they were coming to town and all that stuff, and I heard a lot of people say, just ignore them people. Don't go down there. Just don't pay those folks any attention. You know, if you don't go down there, won't nothing happen. And I remember sitting down with my family in the house, and I was like, no, we're not going to do this. I said, I believe racism is a cancer on this country, and it is slowly decaying away at this country. And I said, just as if I found out my wife or one of my children had stage 4 cancer, I would not ignore that. I'm not going to ignore this.
Right. Good.
And I want all of us to be down there at that march when they show up, because I wanted my kids to know and my family to know that this is not someone else's fight. This is your fight. It's about taking care of your people, like you said. This is your fight. And you have a responsibility to stand up to that racism. You have a responsibility to speak out against that level of racism. And that's why we were down there that day. And when we got down there, man, that was one of the most unsettling times of my life in terms of facing racism, because the first 10 minutes out of the car, and I could not identify. I'm thinking, wait a minute, the United States, did they send a National Guard here to protect us? And I couldn't tell who was National Guard and who was with the racists.
Wow. Wow.
And we couldn't tell. And then all of a sudden, you see these dudes, they standing here and they got AK-47s, AR-15s, they got all kinds of weapons and all kinds of communicating amongst each other. And I'm like, yo, these the racists. That dude could easily just pick that gun up and take my whole family out. It took me a while, about 30 minutes actually, so I don't know if that's a while, but it took us a while to, be able to stand in that and face those people as they were doing what they were doing and saying what they were saying. And I wanted my family to feel that, because we know what our ancestors went through, far more severe than what we were going through in that moment. And so I had to be like, hey, if our ancestors went through what they went through, there's no way you're going to tell me you're not going to stand here and oppose this hatred and this vitriol that they're spewing. No, we're going to stand in this, and we're going to be a resistance to this.
They would have been killed for showing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that was a real moment, man. And obviously then, Heather loses her life, and it's all on everything all over the world, basically. And we were right in the midst of all of that. So that was an example. But, when that happened, they're older, 19.
Yeah.
Carr was 19. Darius in his 20s. But that was a real moment for us.
Wow.
It was a shot heard around the world, because
it's before the George Floyd incident.
If you think about this, that was after that incident. That was the first incident of a succession of racially charged moments up to now that led to the decline in the status quo as it related to overt racial relations and issues. Out of that came the fake news era. Out of that came the alt-right, and all of these hate groups started rising up. Out of that came January the 6th. Out of that came the police violence with George Floyd and all the brothers dying, Ahmaud Arbery, that led to all of these riots and burning of down the police issues. And now we're living in a country that, absent the physical abuses of slavery, that is as close to slavery as we've ever been. Case in point, in Mississippi, are you seeing the news, the headlines that they just passed a takeover of Jackson, Mississippi, and stripped the city and its black power base of its ability to appoint judges, lawyers. They're saying it's a Jim Crow policy. Pretty much going on right now. In Florida, Governor DeSantis, you can't have AP, African American history, talking about anything about race. We only want true American history told. And Northam is not far behind them. And Virginia is now reviewing the courses to see if white children should have to learn Black history. So really now we have a more dangerous racial time now than we've had in a long, long time, to the point where we can sleep if we want to.
Yeah.
But if we think for a minute that it cannot get worse through the use of there's a book called $5 in a Pork Chop Sandwich, right? I was in a advanced school law class. The professor was talking about legislation and governmental agency and bureaucracies and the power of the vote, right? This book called $5 in a Pork Chop Sandwich was what they used to do in New Orleans to buy the votes of poor Blacks. They used to give them $5 in a pork chop sandwich.
Wow.
Right? To the point where they totally were stripped of any legislative power because of the manipulation of the elections that always kept the power base in force. So guess what now? We're going to redraw the lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to come up with all of these. In Atlanta, you can't give water to the people waiting in line for 4 hours to vote.
Yeah.
Right? Punishing people for exercising the right to vote. So the question is, how urgent do you all think it is right now for us as a community and as parents to address this with our children before we lose them into a world where no one thinks it's important, and the next thing you know, they're living in a quasi-segregated society with no rights and no power? Is it urgent? Is the issue of race urgent? As urgent as it used to be?
Yeah, absolutely, it's urgent. And Corey, let me ask you this: what do you think is the stimuli? What's pushing this as of right now, after all the gains, and now why we taking these steps backwards?
Well, the question is, what gains are we talking about in terms of, like, we have more upward mobility as a people, like we have more opportunities to do some things, but as a collective, you know, that we got more poor people now, we got more of this, more of that. And to Joaquin's point, we got some ownership in our community over our condition. Because how long are you gonna ask somebody to keep looking out for you and your best interest when you had the power and now trillions of dollars in our community to give ourselves our own stimulus package?
Because we own more land and property in the 50s and 60s
we
than
did.
we do today.
We did, man. But so you know, our journey right now is figuring out what we can own and control, what rightfully we should be soliciting from the government. At the end of the day, it's up to us. But for our children, to me, it's about their mental health. Because I would have to say, man, it's traumatizing to be a child in an educational environment or somewhere else where you're being treated differently because of the color of your skin. It's traumatizing. And we tell them to suck it up, but that's really not fair. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So the urgency, I just wonder how critical we take that conversation, man, because we suffering still, you know. So.
Nah, I mean, as we sit here in this building, this very building is in a neighborhood that used to be called Vinegar Hill in Charlottesville. This very neighborhood, Vinegar Hill neighborhood, was a part of the urban renewal in the 60s when they just came in and bulldozed all the Black houses in this community. There's a great documentary on PBS called Raised about the whole thing. It's about this community and another community in Durham, North Carolina, where urban renewal was going on all over the country.
R-A-Z-E-D?
Both.
It's
R-A-I-S-E-D and R-A-Z-E-D.
Okay.
Raised. Right. And it talks about what that meant, what happened to the families, where they got pushed out and all that stuff. And so even now, when we try to make policies, and shout out to my man Lorenzo Dickerson who did that.
Great documentary.
Even now, when we talk about it, we got to understand that a lot of the racism we're experiencing is not, you know, driving down the street, you know, you niggas can't afford those cars experience. It's done with policy.
There you go.
Yeah,
right. It's done with policy and laws and restrictions and zoning and guidelines and all of this stuff. You know, I don't want to name the book right now, but yeah, that's what's being done.
Yeah,
and we really have to understand how to fight and overcome that part of it as well. And sometimes we miss the boat because folks not paying attention.
Right.
You know, all the time. Some people are, but more people need to be paying attention.
I was to reflect on that. In Atlanta, there's big housing projects there, and I was watching a documentary, and basically, you know, in the you know, back in the 70s, Caucasians used to be in these housing projects, and then and then the black community, the black community was moving in, but what happened was that when the black community moved in, they moved the Caucasians up on the hill and left the black community on the bottom. And then what happened was more black people started moving into the housing projects, and what they did was they start offering a program so the Caucasians can go and get loans to buy houses. And what happened was some of the black families wanted to get these loans to buy these properties, and there was not a program for them, and so that was where the separation came in. You know, that's where the race, a big separation came in, and very, very, very powerful message. You know, especially since being in real estate and being an investor and seeing this stuff and just seeing how that gap made a huge difference in our community, amongst other things.
Let me ask y'all a question, man. I was thinking about this when we were talking about having this as a topic. I remember, we all know some white, folks that we grew up with, that we went to elementary school with, do middle and high. One of the things I was concerned about with my children, when I talked to y'all about, remember I said I never did sleepovers?
Yeah.
Right? Oh, right.
And that wouldn't have been like, and I probably shouldn't have said it like that because I don't even recall, but if it was one of y'all, I'm sure I'd have been like, yeah, you over Waukee house or whatever, right? But one of the things I was reminded of, man, was growing up and being really close with some white kids in elementary school. I'm going to their house, I'm taking the bus home with them, riding the school bus home. They had more resources than I did. They had the racetracks I wanted and all of these things.
Right.
All of that stuff. I'm like, babe, Mom, I'm going over such and such, right? Spend the night every now and then, and you get to middle school and y'all still cool and everything cool. Then when you get to high school, they on the breezeway, we on the main hallway, black and white, segregated.
Right.
Some of them don't even speak to you anymore, even though you known them from kindergarten. And there's a shift because people start to learn what social circles is acceptable to their own communities, right?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And so there's this breakaway, and almost to the point where you get to the point where I was in 12th grade with some of them, and you speak and they don't say nothing, I'm ready to just choke them out. Straight up. Don't act like, you understand what I'm saying?
Been knowing
and
you
so
all my
the
life.
sad thing is that carried with me as an adult to the point I got stung so much by being openly speaking and people ignoring you, right? That to this day, it's very hard for me. I will make eye contact and read eyes before I just go speak to feel that shunning, because I'm going to be on one.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? And so with my kids, I was like, I'm protecting you from that. No, you can't go spend the night with them. Because I remember the autobiography of Malcolm X, when he talked about that same experience, he called it the mascot. It was a chapter called the mascot, where you like that little mascot. Yeah. This is my little black friend. He's nice. But when it's time to put the toy away, when it's time to really be a white kid, that's not your friend anymore.
Yeah.
You
can't play with them no more.
And still to this day, man, I have to say on social media, after all of that race stuff was going on in the country, and I had a lot of Caucasian friends that I saw silent, like not even saying, oh, wow, this is horrible, but when they asked me about something foolish, I blocked everybody, man. Because I was like, I can't, like, if you don't understand, you know me and us well enough. You know us. You know good black people. And you can't speak up. It's the whole sin of silence that Dr. King talked about. So even as an adult, man, I'm protective of how I move. Always open to love from every human, but always ready to pounce on injustice. And that's kind of the position I feel like, man. What y'all think about?
Yeah, that's heavy. I remember one of the first things as a kid with my son, came home, and then sometimes people think things are just innocent kid stuff, right? And it bothered him a little bit, but we had tried to instill so much love for self, like we talked about earlier, right? And love yourself and positive imagery to the point, even with my little Sports Illustrated, right, swimsuit edition, when there was a sister on there, I kept that one a long time.
Tyra Banks.
Yeah, just so they could
You
see
kept it for them or you kept it for you?
Both,
A little both.
Hey, because we don't
Little
get
both.
the jet no more, you know what I mean?
Man.
So we was at the pool, and the little white kid was like, "Oh my gosh, look, he has chocolate toes. He got chocolate toes." You know, and so we was laughing.
Your
so
toes,
good.
two toes chocolate, because your toes ain't
No,
chocolate now. Nah,
not
man.
funny.
Yeah,
That's hilarious.
and so something like that, right? And so we was like, did it bother you, or was it laughing at you? So that was something where we ought to teach you to love yourself, and some people ain't never seen nothing, and you got beautiful toes, and they want toes like you for real, right? Now you fast forward to my son dating a girl, right? And my son is Dominican, black, right? But when you see him, he's black. He don't look like he's darker than me, right?
Black when
Brown.
the police see him too.
Right, exactly. That's the point. And so, talking to this young lady, one of his first girlfriends, and she happened to be Spanish, But the dad said, well, you can't date him. He was supposed to be a preacher, and they was using it as
He was supposed to be
Yeah,
a preacher?
yeah.
Or he was a preacher.
Exactly. As
He was a so-called preacher.
so-called, exactly, but it wasn't. So fast forward, man. He's been in a few situations where he's been rejected like that. You feel me? And
What'd
I'm
you
like,
tell him?
I already warned you in advance. You knew this was gonna happen. You knew this was gonna happen. Now, you love who you love, right? However, you can't try to be super Negro, right? You be yourself. You
That's
be
the
the
speech
best
I
you can
give
be.
him.
Yeah.
Don't you go
What's
trying.
Super Negro?
You trying to prove to these people, I'm not like these other guys.
Oh,
and all
okay,
that stuff.
yeah.
And so
I
I'm
ain't like these other Negroes.
yeah.
I'm
got
super nigga. Look at me.
I'm
Look
different.
at they can't wait for a white person to say, you're different.
You're not like
Yeah.
the
That's
other
some
one.
BS.
Right.
You know what I mean? I
Wow.
told my son, when you dating, whoever you dating, don't you dare go in those people's houses.
Hold
trying to
on.
super-
Whoever you dating, when you dating somebody of the opposite race
Yeah.
or Caucasian.
When you exactly.
Because
Especially.
it don't apply if you
Yeah.
dating somebody black. So make
Why
Wow,
y'all
you
date this,
speak
man?
really well.
let's make
Yeah,
it, let's make it clear.
When you
Yeah.
are dating someone of the opposite race, don't you dare go in those people's house trying to impress them. You be yourself.
Right.
Don't
right,
you go in there playing super Negro.
Right.
And that's something I always told my sons. Do not do that. That's lowering yourself.
Yeah.
Don't
yeah,
do that.
Yeah.
And if you get that, you're different. All of that. You speak all that. Don't you buy into that nonsense.
Yeah.
You
You
sure
know,
the
don't
difference
you buy
wouldn't
into
be
that nonsense.
if a brother can't dance or something like that? That's what would be different.
Hey, do you know how to moonwalk?
Like, no.
But in addition to what
Like
Ford
our
was
governor
saying,
was about to moonwalk. when he
Yeah.
was in trouble.
when we was talking about how many school meetings we went to where say, well, he's doing pretty good. No, he's not doing good. To whose
Yeah.
standard?
Yeah. Right.
What
right,
you mean
right,
he's
right,
doing good?
right.
Nah,
Right.
so you trying to
Doing
my,
better than most
my
blacks.
daughter
not
is
cutting
getting
up.
these grades. I'm sorry if you have low expectations for your daughter, but that we have high expectations. I would hope that you had the same for my son as far as keeping him in this class or not promoting him to that class. So we have lots of stories like that, man.
I lit. I would light school folks up over stuff. I had a was in high school, and the teacher was trying to defend him. It was the first semester in high school. He had all C's, right? Okay, I got you. Midterm, right? I said, I called up to the school. I said, I need to meet with all of Amir Carter's teacher at once. I'm telling you what I want. They came in there. He was sitting in the guidance counselor's office when I got to the school. He said, I shouldn't be here right now. Right. I said, I know you shouldn't. I know you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Teachers came in. I'm hearing all these accolades. I didn't tell them why I was coming. I just said, I want to meet y'all. Oh, Amir's great. He all C's. I said, let me tell y'all something. What do y'all mean he's great? He has a C in your class. What is your expectation of him? I'm putting it to the test.
Yeah.
I was when I was teaching in Baltimore, it was this powerful system, man. We were developing this community school concept, and I was selected as a first-year teacher to be on this committee. And I'm not saying I was selected because I was great. I probably was the only new one ready to do something extra or something, right? But she said something that stuck with me. She said, when you see racism, you have to fight it wherever you see it. Every time it rears its head, you have to do something to address it. And that might not mean you cussing nobody out, but you can calmly say, hey, I think we have an issue of injustice right here that needs to be addressed. And so my point was, I was telling them, I was putting them to the test. What do you mean? He tried to wiggle out of it. The teacher did. No, I'm just saying, no. Is your expectation for him to have an A in this class? And he was silent.
Hey,
and I knew it wasn't your expectation. And until, now throughout the rest of that year, you know what I got? So this is advice to parents. Put them to the test. Don't call it out over no random stuff. Ask questions. Is this your intention? Because after that, he was the most responsive educator, pushing my son to the limit, to the point where he was a drama teacher that they now stay in touch with one another, and he follows Amir's growth and what he's doing in media. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So look at how much
I
you
brought
probably
that to
helped
his
that
attention.
teacher. Yeah.
Exactly.
You helped him become
I helped him with his implicit bias.
Right. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
they even said, but it even said that he's so well dressed, he's so well mannered, people like him. What they got to do with his grades?
Yeah.
What does that have to do? They said that like I was like, okay, well that's good enough.
right.
Go ahead, shit, my bad.
No, you're fine. I remember living in Georgia, close to the Atlanta area. It was a city called Forsyth. Which
Was it the county?
Yeah,
Or was it-
Forsyth County.
Forsyth
Yeah.
back in the day.
That was
Yeah.
on Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah,
Oh,
see,
yeah.
That was on Oprah,
see,
like in the 80s, late
every-
80s, early 90s.
Yeah, everybody know about Forsyth all over. And this particular day, I was out selling meat in a little mobile delivery truck.
Young people would say pause.
Yeah,
right.
Little
Steaks and chicken
Yeah,
and
seafood.
pork chops, seafood.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was out in the neighborhood, going door to door, selling steak, chicken, seafood in the meat truck. And I knocked on this particular door. And, basically everybody always said, whatever y'all do not go to Forsyth. Well, I'm hard-headed. You know what I mean? I'm like, man, whatever. And I have been getting some racist threats all day, but, I ain't care. I dealt with that as a young person all my life, right? So I was out there this particular day, and this kid, he had to be at least 12 years old, Caucasian, and I knocked on the door, and he came to the door, and I remember he got to the door first, and then his mother was behind him, and he was like, "Mommy," and she was like, "What?" She was like, "That one, right? Look at that one," and I was kind of confused, like what that one mean. She was like, he said, "I never seen one of them before." And I'm like, he 12 years old. I'm assuming about 12. And this is like in 95, maybe something like that. 95. And so that was, to me, that was like his first time ever seeing a black person in real life in 95. Like I said, he like 12. And that really tripped me out. I was like, man, how in the world you in the United States? And you ain't never seen us.
That's one of the things you got to remember. There's some places where we just not there.
How far
Right.
you want to live in Georgia outside Atlanta?
Yeah.
Was it?
It is.
Hey, I wanted to ask a question. I'm not being funny, but how does chocolate toes turn to black toes?
Right.
And I'm talking about, to your reference earlier when the white kid said he has chocolate toes. Because, and I'm pointing out the innocence of childhood versus what they end up getting indoctrinated with. Because chocolate toes, like kids love chocolate.
Right.
Hey, he's chocolate toes.
Right.
Right?
That's funny.
Right.
I mean, we like chocolate. What kid doesn't like chocolate, right? When did that turn to black toes?
Right.
Well, like you were saying earlier, for me, like when we went to middle school, that's when the division
Yeah,
started.
yeah.
You cool with people, but then, like you said, it started separating sort of where you sat at and ate lunch, or who you played with on the playground, who you played ball with.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's how.
That breakup, man, it's a thing, man, because like you might be their best friend early on, man, and they just go And from my experience, white kids, they really play that game. We're a little more, you know, it ain't till you start drinking and smoking and stuff that y'all get back together as juniors and seniors. Then you got that in common again. But they did used to hide the parties from us. You got to figure out during the week where the party was gonna be, right? but and then proceed to go to the party and deliver I have a dream speech. I can't. But shout out to Ward.
Yes, sir.
But anyway, man, so as we talk about some stuff parents can keep in mind, I think it's important for Waki to say the victim thing, because it's dangerous to have your child believe that they can't do something about it or that they're a victim. That's just as dangerous as the racism.
You know, one thing I would always say to my sons, and it can be looked at as a little controversial. I don't think it is if you understand what I mean. And I guess this is my chance to explain it. You know, when we think about racism, we think about the power to impact lives, the power to impact educational system, healthcare system, housing, you know, economics, financial, all of that stuff. We think about that. And so the real racism is the ability to impact people in that way. One of the reasons I always preach entrepreneurship to my sons is because I would always tell them in every aspect of that, if you get you some money, okay? If you get you some money and you get enough money, they don't control where you live. They don't control the kind of education your kids get. They don't control your health care. They don't control your financial assets that you're able to acquire. So once you do that, you now are almost in a position to reduce that racism to personal prejudice. Now they just call you a nigga. Well, so what? It don't matter. I live where I live. I'm doing what I'm doing. My kids getting the best education. My family travel all over the world and vacation all over the world. This is what's happening now. So now
your dependency on them for all your needs increases the likelihood of disrespect.
Absolutely.
And your ability to be financially independent increases the respect others have for you, and they see you different.
Because now we're getting into social economics.
Right.
And now, you know what? Because that's what folk respect in this country.
Money.
Yeah, exactly. So we not in a position to where we got to depend on them for education and all that stuff. Prison system, all of that stuff, man. The judicial system, you can get you the best lawyer. Educational, you can get you the best teachers and tutors and professors and all of this stuff. That stuff not impacting you in that way anymore. Yeah. And so that don't mean ain't no racism, because here's the biggest thing. It's not about how I'm living, it's about my people.
What was that quote with Uncle T? Collective versus individual.
What you mean? Which one? I can't remember.
As far as gaining our rights
collectively. My Uncle T would always say that we got our rights as a group. We got our civil rights as a group. We must get our silver rights, our financial, as individuals. You know, you got to go out here and make it happen. You got to go out here and scrap. My man John Hope Bryant talks about that a lot. Our silver rights.
Okay, you know, then on top of that, though, what needs to happen then is to pool the resources of our silver
absolutely
rights.
Yeah. But you got to get you some so you can join the pool.
Right.
That's a fact.
Well, how long the dollar stay in our community?
5 seconds.
And that's I was about to say that's the challenge right there.
12 hours.
Yeah. 5 seconds. You know, so that's what I always was constantly preaching. Hey, let's try to do our best to get our financial resources to the place where we individually may be able to reduce that racism just down to personal prejudice.
And that's that personal responsibility at
yes.
part at 400 years from slavery. 450. Listen, this is the other message about race that I share with my son, not just about fighting the racism, but listen, we don't have any excuses, man. We know the history.
Yeah.
We got opportunity now because our ancestors fought dead and bled and died for it time and time again, right?
Yep.
You directly connected to somebody that made it through the Middle Passage. right? Somebody in your bloodline was strong enough to endure the Middle Passage, endure the brutality of slavery, endure being killed for the act of reading, and then we sitting here asking people, telling the government they're not doing enough for us. And it shows you that the systemic racism worked in terms of indoctrinating us to believe that we're inferior. But at this point, game up, no more.
Yeah.
You can't. We not playing that card anymore, because if you look at the amount of money that is coming into our community, we have enough money and power to get the level of racial respect that you're talking about. But who can respect you if you acting like clowns and thinking that it's all about the bling bling and the flash? I wouldn't respect us either at this point.
Right.
Why am I gonna respect you if you keep coming and begging me for what you can do for yourself? It's just like anything else. Don't you ever bite the hand that's feeding you, right? You know what I'm saying? So, Joaquin said in the last episode, or one of the episodes, whoever has your ear has your destiny.
Talik said it too.
Talik said it. Who has the ear of our people? It's the media. It's false textbooks, false narratives. It's the philanthropic people who have great, wonderful hearts, but don't understand the level of patronization that keeps us crippled. You understand what I'm saying?
Rappers.
So the rappers. Hey, listen, man. We only have enough time to go there.
That's another show. We ain't
Yeah.
gonna talk about the rappers. We
Yeah,
ain't gonna talk about the rappers.
Yeah, I don't even call it. I don't even know. It's not even rapping anymore. It's just like,
That's another show, man.
yeah, I get
Rhythm
it.
music.
You know what I wanted you to talk about? Because I think wherever you're from, it's always a different dynamic. And you always like to talk about where we were raised here in Charlottesville and talking about the aristocrats and all that.
yeah.
I want you to talk about that
That's
because
why-
I think that's very important in terms of who
Yeah.
we are and
Yeah.
what shaped us unknowingly.
Yeah, if you grow up and you black in this town and in the surrounding counties, you have to understand and remember that, number one, at the time of these colonial periods, Virginia was the size of like California or Texas is right now in terms of population relative to the other colonies. Virginia was it. You got 3 of the first 5 presidents that were born within 40 miles of one another, right?
Right where we sit.
Right in this area,
Yeah.
right? You know, again, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. Back then, if you were from Tidewater up to this area right here, you were from planter families, they called them, right? Those were the wealthiest Virginia families that had all of the land, and they were part of what was considered the aristocracy, right?
Mhm.
So this area has always been, there was no cotton that grew around here, right? They farmed tobacco and other things. So slavery, and even though I'm not trivializing how difficult it is to be harvesting tobacco, it was not like harvesting cotton. So you had a very, if we would call it today, bougie white community around here. So slaves were to some degree treated less brutally than in other areas in Deep South where slavery was much more brutal. So there's always been sort of a air of growing up around here that is not so bad. It's not as bad as it ever did. Thomas Jefferson took Sally Hemings brother over to France with him. He ended up inventing macaroni and cheese, right? People don't even. I'm just saying. So there were slaves that were given jobs, that were given freedom, where they were able to make their own money in this area. So it's always been a system here where the appearance was much better than the actual reality for some. And back when you said to policy, there's never been a lot of overt racism here because those people feel they're too educated and refined to be the type of low-level racist that is an outward racist. And that's why there was so much hurt on the part of the community when the marchers came because, what?
Yeah.
That's not how we do it. We just
Yeah.
write a
Like-
policy that they don't understand. You understand what I'm saying? So,
Like they,
so you
they
can
got
get
it to a mwah.
very comfortable here thinking everything is all right. And meanwhile, you being stripped and emasculated.
Urban renewal
and the
happened right
great,
under
yeah,
there.
exactly, and it's muted.
Hey, bro, I think that we can sit here and talk about this for days, and we all have individual stories to share, and that type of thing. And we all grew up here, and I know for me, and light bright as I am, I got plenty of stories. Right?
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, and so growing up,
And you got to be the fly on the wall.
yeah,
Like for real.
no, the spook that sit at the door.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you the
go with
spook
that
that
one,
set
right?
at the door.
Yeah, and so in saying that, man, again, because we can collectively tell stories all day long, even myself included. And but I think about what Corey was just saying, backpacking in the area that I grew up in the country, Cobham, Sismont, in that area, right? And we had a thriving Black community, Zion Hill Church, St. John's. Shout out to R.A. Johnson. And I'm gonna show y'all an article with Mom Sally and Miss Geraldine Johnson too, and the Johnsons on St. John's Road, and all that they did back in the day, you know.
Yep.
And so we talk about this all the time about loving and building up your child. Man, in that community, I was loved. We felt loved, And the funny thing about it, just like you said, when I got older and I got in real estate and I look at GIS maps and all that kind of stuff, right? I said, man, you go up here to Thomas Jefferson birthplace in Shadwell, you make a left until you get 15 miles down the road or further to Gordonsville. There's 5,000 acre farms that been there forever, right?
Plantation.
Yeah, plantation farms.
Yeah.
These are still today very wealthy farms. You don't see no dairy cows or beef cows or produce on it. These are horse, some of them turn into wineries, right, to produce money. And here you go in the middle, this pocket, this Black community, that work for them, cook and clean for white folks. However, out of that Black community, we had a brother go to Princeton. We sent a couple pro players, from that little area. And so I thank God for that community, because I'm standing on their shoulders, and today we don't have that same type of community, Well, all of them knew me and I knew them, and it was just a love and a confidence that was instilled in me. And I'm so thankful for that.
Well, a big part of that, and we talked about this before, is being the patriarch and the matriarch in this family, and everybody running off to New York, Chicago, and Detroit to make a buck. And now our young people, our little nieces and nephews and cousins, don't have that home front to come back to. Don't have home base to come back to.
You talk about me?
Yeah. No,
So you saying we have a brain drain in the Black community in Charlottesville, so to speak. No disrespect to anybody who don't leave.
That's why I left.
Yeah,
What would you say? What?
It's a
Brain
brain
drain.
drain.
Oh,
I read a dissertation. Somebody shared it with me about Black professionals in the 40s in this area having to leave because of the limited opportunity. I read that, and at the time I was like in transition. I've been in the school system. I tried the corporate thing, tried the business. I'm getting up out of here.
Yeah.
They're telling me this has been going on since the 40s.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? And it's unfortunate that you got to leave, but you can leave here and elevate like this. With what
Correct.
you learn from this culturally refined community, you can parlay that into some success pretty
Absolutely.
easily. You know what I'm saying? And so, but how do we, as we wrap up here, man, y'all putting out something great. Like in terms of advice, I think we all talking about knowledge, self-love, you part of the community, but really the solution is rebuilding community. And it don't mean everybody got to move back, but are we doing the type of community events and family reunions that are showing our kids from various backgrounds, hey, you connected to somebody.
Right.
It's all right. It's other people like you. And now the idea is we on an island, man. You know what I'm
Right,
saying? And
right.
that's for somebody else, especially when you get a couple of dollars.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And the folks that do move away, oh man, I don't want that land. Sell that land. Sell that
Yeah,
land. Not
right.
knowing the value, of
That's real, man.
maintaining.
My father-in-law, Mr. Plew Johnson, shout out, God rest his soul. He would tell me stories. My wife's dad, and this is the point I want to hit home real quick before we go. When we talk about this, we are not that far removed. Sometimes people have a tendency to think we are that far removed. My father-in-law, who my children know, got to spend time with, was raised in a household with his grandmother. His grandmother was a slave.
Wow.
His grandmother was a slave, and he heard her stories about slavery. and then he is sitting in the living room with us. This ain't
Right.
that far.
Right.
This is not that far. And so people need to understand. Darius used to always say, I tell you what, if I had a 400 years head start, I'd be much further along. The gap should be bigger.
Right.
That's what my son says. The gap should be bigger. If I had a 400-year head
Hey,
start,
I've
the
never
gap
even
would be
heard
bigger.
anybody put it to them like that, but that's a powerful thing he said.
Yeah,
man.
but and it speaks to him being empowered through it.
Yeah.
And understanding that he's been empowered through this. And man, that's just so important that we need to take this and learn to empower our kids. One of the stories I told before about being stopped by the police constantly and then John showing up and us going to Virginia Union. That's a racist situation that we then turned and made it for good.
Yeah.
And it has to be examples like that throughout our lives.
Yeah.
In terms of what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to accomplish, and all of that. And we gotta overcome that stuff. I could tell a ton of stories like we all could, but
Hey, look, it's the B2M crew, and wrapping that conversation up. I think to summarize some guidance, we talk about self-love, building a community, having the knowledge, and feeling a responsibility to do something about it and be active about it. Because at the end of the day, we cannot be afraid. There's no reason to be afraid when you're confronting racism. Just be calm, address it, because if you don't address it, you just letting it continue and you almost fueling the flame. So, and address it with love and understanding, but most importantly, back to our children, love them to death. Like Talik said, I'm sowing way more into them. He said this in the episode about coping. I'm showing way more love into them than the hate that they being experienced.
Before we go, let me ask you this question.
Absolutely.
When we are the people we are, sometimes in certain rooms, we become the representation for Black people.
Right.
And white folks want to come to you and say, want you to explain situations, want you to tell them what they can do to help, those types of things. How do y'all feel about that? And I'll say how I feel about it. I used to be like, don't ask me that. I don't speak for all Black people. But then I started to think, you know what? I'd rather you ask me than some Clarence Thomas Black people that I know.
That's a fact.
So yeah, you can ask me all the questions you want and we can engage in this dialogue, because a lot of times, man, we cannot leave out the fact that the way we fix this problem is through dialogue and relationships. That's what I think. We got to work on dialogue and relationships to work on this problem, and you do it one step at a time. What I say to any white person that always say, what can I do to help? I tell them one thing, for real. The next time you at the family gathering, Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever you at, birthday party, and somebody say something out of the way that you know is inappropriate, don't sit on your hands.
Put them in check.
Speak up and say
you
something.
didn't answer like Malcolm X said when the girl asked him, Mr. X, what can I do? Nothing.
Yeah.
I think
right, exactly.
I think to just a little snippet. I think what happens is when they come to us, what they heard about Black people, and then when they see you is not really matching up, and then they might feel that you're approachable.
Yeah.
And they feel like it's a safe environment to ask these questions.
And it should be. I think it should be. I don't know. If
If you
everybody on that
sincere-
same page.
Yeah, if you sincere in your thirst or your quest for learning something, it's fine. And how you go about and asking somebody that question, that's it. Absolutely.
That's what I was gonna add. Just courageous dialogue. You can't just be no dialogue.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It has to be courageous dialogue.
some
Where they're
truth.
not afraid. Yeah, where they're not afraid to say what it is they're thinking about it, and of course us not being afraid to say what it is that our experience of no longer accepting Black inferiority over superiority, which is the root of so-called racism or white supremacy.
You're letting your people down if you don't take the opportunity to educate people.
And let me just leave on this note, and I'm gonna shut up after this.
After this, take us on.
But when we had this discussion, I always like to keep in mind that the truth is never inappropriate, but the truth without compassion is cruelty. And so when we having these dialogues, we want to make sure that we speak in truth, but we also bring a level of compassion and understanding to the conversation.
Right.
And that's how we build bridges and move forward.
And if you don't tell the truth in the right spirit, people put their fingers in their ears, because truth in and of itself is something that frees people, and you can't free them with bad energy, no matter what you're telling them about the truth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, hey, it's the B2M Crew podcast, chopping it up on issues of race here at the Code Building in Charlottesville. One of our wonderful sponsors, 5 Black men, of course, chopping it up, sharing with you our 40-year friendship. Hit us up on YouTube, Twitter, and IG at B2M Crew. Joaquin, you taking us out with something again?
Yeah, man, always. In the words of the great Frederick Douglass, it is easier to raise strong children than it is to repair broken men. Peace.
That's a fact.
And I won't stop until I'm winning. I'ma show them how true and independent get it. Whole game changed by the time I finish with it. We about to get this business handled in a minute. And I won't stop until I'm winning. They don't want me in the office cause I